Princess Valasarani stood before the tall mirror in her chamber and adjusted the silver circlet on her head. Today was an important day. She was about to leave for the most significant diplomatic mission of her life. The treaty she would negotiate at Nexus Prime could end a 100 red years of Cold War between her people and the Koran Empire. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. A soft knock came at her door. "Enter," she said without turning. Her advisor, an elderly Valoran named Counselor Merrick, stepped inside. His 4 eyes blinked nervously, which told her something was wrong. "Your Highness, the human has arrived." Valitha's jaw tightened. She had almost forgotten about this insult. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, had insisted that a human bodyguard accompany her on this mission. It was part of some new security exchange program between Earth and the Allied worlds. Her father, the king, had agreed without consulting her. "Send him away," she said. "I have Commander Thurax in my royal guards. I do not need a human following me around like a lost pet. Your Highness, the king has already accepted. The human is waiting in the throne room." Valitha turned sharply. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow with frustration. "Then let us see what the famous humans have sent to protect the heir of Valoria." She walked through the crystal corridors of the palace with long, graceful steps. Valorans were tall and elegant, standing nearly 7 ft on average. Their 4 eyes gave them excellent vision, and their bodies were built for the low gravity of their home world. They were considered one of the most beautiful species in the galaxy. Humans, on the other hand, were considered primitive. They came from a harsh world of extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, and violent history. They had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Most species saw them as aggressive, short-lived, and unremarkable. Thea entered the throne room and stopped. Standing before her father's throne was a human male. He was short by Valoran standards, barely 6 feet tall. He had brown hair cut close to his head and a face that seemed designed to be forgotten. He wore simple gray clothes, with no armor, no visible weapons, and no rank insignia. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture straight but relaxed. This was her protector, this ordinary, plain, small creature. "Ah, Valitha," her father said from his throne, "come and meet Daniel Carter. He will be your escort for the mission to Nexus Prime." Daniel gave a small bow. "Your Highness, it is an honor to serve." His voice was quiet and calm. Valitha noticed his eyes, though. They were moving, taking in everything in the room without seeming to look anywhere specific. Still, she was not impressed. "Father," she said, not bothering to hide her displeasure, "surely this is a joke. This human carries no weapon. He wears no armor. He looks like a servant, not a soldier. I assure you, daughter, Mr. Carter comes highly recommended by Earth's military command. He has served in their special forces for 15 years. Thea looked at Daniel again. 15 years. He barely looked 30 years old. Humans age so quickly. Perhaps his mind was already failing. "With respect, Your Majesty," she said, "I would rather take my chances with Commander the alone than rely on this human." She saw something flicker in Daniel's eyes. It was there for just a moment, then gone. He did not respond to her insult. He simply stood there waiting. "The decision is made," her father said firmly. "The treaty with Earth requires this gesture of trust. You will treat Mr. Carter with respect, and he will accompany you to Nexus Prime. That is final. Velitha wanted to argue, but she knew that tone, her father would not change his mind. Very well, she said Colby, but I am reducing my guard. If Earth wants to prove their humans are capable, then let this one prove it. I will take only Commander Thera and the human, no other guards. Her father frowned. Belitha, that is unwise. You said I should trust the human, so I will trust him. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. If he fails, it will prove that humans are not ready for such responsibilities. The king studied his daughter for a long moment, then sighed. Very well, but you will not dismiss Mr. Carter for any reason. He stays with you until you return home safely. Velitha gave a short nod and turned to leave. Come, human, we depart within the hour. Daniel followed her without a word. Commander Thrax was waiting at the shuttle bay. He was a Tavaloran warrior, with scars on his face and arms from decades of combat. When he saw Daniel, his 4 eyes narrowed with obvious distrust. This is our additional security, they asked. One human. Apparently, Velitha said, the Galactic Council believes he is sufficient. Looked Daniel up and down. Do you even know how to fight human when necessary? Daniel said simply. Thurix snorted. Humans, you think because you survived on your death world that you are warriors, but you have never faced a real enemy. The Corrin would break you like a dry branch. Daniel said nothing. He simply picked up the princess's luggage and carried it toward the shuttle. Belitha watched him go with a mixture of annoyance and confusion. Most beings would have defended themselves against such an insult. Most soldiers would have boasted about their skills or their victories. This human just accepted the mockery and continued working. Perhaps he truly was useless. Perhaps he knew he was only here as a political gesture and had accepted his role as a glorified servant. At least he knows his place. Velitha muttered. She boarded the shuttle and took her seat in the comfortable passenger cabin. Derek sat across from her, already reviewing security protocols on his data pad. Daniel sat in the back near the door, his eyes closed as if he were sleeping. The shuttle lifted off and began its journey toward the jump gate that would take them to Nexus Prime. 3 days of travel lay ahead. 3 days with this silent, strange human. Looked out the window at the stars and tried to focus on the mission ahead. Corrin would be difficult to negotiate with. They were proud and aggressive, always looking for weakness to exploit. She could not afford any distractions. She glanced back at Daniel. His eyes were still closed, but something about his stillness seemed wrong. It was not the relaxation of sleep. It was something else, something she could not name. She turned away and dismissed the thought. He was just a human. What could he possibly know that she did not? The diplomatic vessel moved through the darkness of space at incredible speed. It was a beautiful ship, though, for comfort and elegance rather than war. The Valorian royal family had used it for generations to travel between worlds. In style, Valtha spent the first day of the journey in her private quarters, reviewing the treaty documents and preparing her arguments. The negotiations with the Corni would be difficult. They wanted access to Valoran trade routes, and people wanted guarantees of non-aggression. Both sides had demands. Both sides had pride. She barely noticed Daniel during this time. He stayed out of her way. quiet and invisible like a piece of furniture exactly as she preferred. On the second day, she emerged from her quarters to take a meal in the ship's dining room. Commander Thrax was already there eating a large plate of grilled meat. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. "Where is the human?" Valitha asked as she sat down. The shrugged his broad shoulders. "Wandering the ship again. He has been doing it since we left Valoria. Wandering, walking through every corridor, opening every door, looking at every room." The shook his head. "I think he is afraid of ships. Humans spend most of their history trapped on their planet. Space makes them nervous." Thea accepted a plate of food from a servant and began to eat. "Perhaps he is simply bored. Humans have short attention spans, perhaps." Derek did not sound convinced, "but I've seen him checking the ventilation systems 3 times now. And he spent an hour in the engine room yesterday asking the engineers questions about what? Emergency procedures, escape routes, how to shut down various systems." The laughed. The chief engineer thought he was planning to sabotage the ship. The Litha frowned. That was strange behavior for a bodyguard. What could a human possibly learn from studying a Valoran ship? After a meal, she went looking for Daniel. She found him in one of the lower corridors, standing perfectly still and staring at a wall panel. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Daniel turned to face her. His expression was calm and neutral. "Learning the ship, Your Highness." "Why? Do you plan to steal it?" "No, Your Highness, I plan to protect you on it." He gestured the wall panel. "This corridor connects the passenger quarters to the cargo bay. If someone wanted to approach your room without being seen, they could use the maintenance tunnels behind this panel." The leather stared at him. "No one is going to attack me on my own ship." "Probably not," Daniel agreed. "But I like to know my environment, just in case." She studied his face, looking for some sign of mockery or deception. She found nothing, just calm, patient honesty. "You are a strain human," she said finally. "I have been told that before, Your Highness." That evening, Valitha hosted a small formal dinner in the ship's dining room. It was a tradition when traveling on diplomatic mission. The senior staff of the ship attended along with the reluctantly Daniel. The human sat at the far end of the table, eating quietly while the Valorans discussed politics and gossip. Valitha watched him occasionally, curious despite herself. "Tell me, Mr. Garter," she said during a pause in the conversation, "what do humans know of Valoran culture?" The table went quiet. Several Valorans smiled, expecting the human to embarrass himself. Daniel set down his fork and thought for a moment. "Valorian civilization is approximately 12,000 years old. Your people developed space travel about 3,000 years before humans learned to make fire. You were founding interstellar colonies when my ancestors were still living in caves." The smiles around the table faded slightly. "Your current government is a constitutional monarchy," Daniel continued. "The royal family holds executive power, but the Parliament of Houses controls legislation. The balance has worked well for about 2,000 years, with only 3 civil conflicts in that time." Valitha raised an eyebrow. "You have studied our history for 2 years, Your Highness. I also studied your language, your customs, your art, and your military traditions." He paused. "I believe that too. Protect someone, you must understand them, and to understand someone, you must understand their people." The table was completely silent now. They leaned forward. And what did you learn about our military traditions? Human, that Valoran warriors value honor above all else, that they prefer direct combat over deception, that they consider ambush tactics to be cowardly. Daniel's voice remained steady. These are admirable qualities. They also create certain vulnerabilities that an enemy might exploit. Thirx's eyes narrowed. You think our traditions make us weak? I think your traditions make you predictable, and predictability can be dangerous. The tension in the room was thick. Thea expected Thorx to challenge the human, perhaps even strike him, but the commander simply stared at Daniel for a long moment, then returned to his meal without another word. Later that night, Valetha found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the quiet corridors of the ship, thinking about the negotiations ahead. As she passed through the observation deck, she saw Daniel standing at the large window, looking out at the stars. Do you not sleep, Mr. Carter? He turned. I sleep when I can, Your Highness. Tonight is not one of those times. She walked to stand beside him. The view was beautiful. Thousands of stars sparkled against the infinite black void. You surprised me at dinner, she admitted. I did not expect a human to know so much about my people. Most people do not expect much from humans at all, Daniel said. We are used to it. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. Why did you accept this assignment? She asked. Surely you knew I would not welcome you. I accept it because it was important. The relationship between Earth and Valoria is new. Trust must be built through actions, not words. He looked at her. My job is to keep you safe. Your opinion of me does not change that responsibility. Valetha did not know how to respond. She had expected a simple human with simple motivations. Instead, she had found something unexpected. Good night, Mr. Carter, she said. Finally, good night, Your Highness. She returned to her quarters, her mind troubled by thoughts she could not quite understand. In his own small room, Daniel checked the encrypted message he had received from Earth intelligence. The warning was vague but concerning. Increased chatter among extremist groups, possible threats against peace negotiations. Nothing confirmed, but enough to raise alarm. He did not tell the princess. There was no need to worry her with possibilities, but he increased his vigilance, sleeping only in short periods and spending the rest of the night walking the corridors of the ship. Whatever was coming, he would be ready. Nexus Prime appeared through the observation window like a jewel floating in space. The massive station was built at the intersection of 12 major trade routes, making it the perfect location for neutral negotiations. Thousands of ships surrounded it, arriving and departing constantly. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived and worked within its enormous structure. Valetha felt her heart beat faster as their ship approached the docking ring. This was the moment she had trained for. The future of her people depended on what happened here. Remember, the said as they prepared to disembark, the Corin will be watching for any sign of weakness. Stand tall, show no emotion. Let them see the strength of Valoria. Valetha nodded. She adjusted her formal robes and placed the ceremonial crown upon her head. She was no longer just a princess, she was the representative of her entire civilization. Daniel stood quietly by the door, wearing the same simple gray clothes he had worn Since leaving Valoria, he carried no visible weapons and showed no signs of concern. The Litha had almost forgotten. He was there. The airlock opened and they stepped onto Nexus Prime. A crowd had gathered to welcome them. Representatives from dozens of species stood along the corridor, watching as the Valoran delegation passed. Servants bowed, diplomats nodded in respect. Camera drones floated overhead, broadcasting the arrival across the galaxy. Valetha walked with perfect grace, acknowledging the crowd with subtle nods. The walked beside her, his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. Daniel followed, several steps behind, his eyes moving constantly. The welcome reception was held in a grand hall at the center of the diplomatic district. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across the polished floor. Tables were filled with food and drink from 100 different worlds. The most powerful beings in the galaxy mingled and talked, making deals and alliances with every conversation. The Corin delegation was already present. They stood on the opposite side of the hall, a group of tall, gray-skinned beings with sharp features and cold eyes. The Corin were a warrior species built for combat and conquest. Their empire spanned 300 worlds, all taken through military force. Only the combined strength of the Galactic Council had stopped their expansion. Their leader, Ambassador Draven, watched Valeth's arrival with obvious interest. He was older than most, Corm with white scars crossing his face, like a map of past battles. When Valetha approached, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Princess Valetha, he said, his voice deep and smooth. What a pleasure to finally meet you. I have heard much about your beauty and intelligence. Ambassador Draven. Valetha kept her voice neutral. I hope our negotiations will bring peace to both our peoples. Peace. Draven repeated the word as if tasting it. Yes, peace would be profitable for everyone. His eyes moved past her, landing on Daniel. And what is this? A human bodyguard? How unusual. Gesture of cooperation with Earth. Valetha said, interesting choice. Draven studied Daniel with the look of a predator examining potential prey. Humans are such fragile creatures. I wonder what they could possibly contribute to galactic security. Daniel said nothing. He simply stood there, his face empty of expression. Enjoy the reception, Princess. Draven said, we have much to discuss in the days ahead. He walked away, rejoining his delegation. Thea let out a small breath. She had not realized she was holding. I do not trust him, Tex murmured. Neither do I, Valetha agreed, but we must try. The alternative is more years of tension and potential war. As the reception continued, Daniel slowly moved around the room. He did not speak to anyone or draw attention to himself. He simply observed, watching the crowd with careful attention. Something was wrong. He had been trained to notice patterns, to see things that others missed, and he was seeing a pattern now. Scattered around the room were individuals who did not belong. A Courtney soldier standing, two still near the exit, a mercenary from the outer systems watching the Valoran delegation too closely, a hooded figure near the food tables whose body language screamed military training. 8 of them, all positioned around the room, all watching. Daniel approached the quietly. Commander, we need to leave. Dariax looked at him with annoyance. The reception has just begun. We cannot insult our host by leaving. Early, there are at least 8 hostiles. In this room, possibly more. They are watching us. They scan the crowd with his 4 eyes. I see nothing unusual. You are imagining threats, human. This is a secure facility with station security everywhere. Commander, please. I am asking you to trust me. Trust you. Drax laughed softly. You have done nothing to earn my trust. Stand back and let me do my job. Daniel wanted to argue, but he knew it would be useless. Instead, he sent an urgent message through his neural implant to Earth Intelligence, requesting any information about threats against the Valoran princes. The response came within minutes. A bounty had been placed on Princess Valitha, 2,000,000 credits for her death. The contract originated from a faction within the Koran Empire who opposed the peace treaty. They believed that war was inevitable and that killing the princess would give them the excuse they needed to attack. Daniel moved immediately to Veliva's side. Your Highness, we must return to the ship. She turned to face him, irritation clear on her features. Do not be ridiculous. I cannot leave in the middle of there is a contract on your life. Professional assassins are in this room. We leave now or you die tonight. Valitha studied his face. She saw no panic, no uncertainty, just cold, hard certainty. How many? She asked quietly. At least 8 confirmed. Probably more. She glanced around the room, trying to spot the threats he had identified. She saw nothing unusual, but something in Daniel's voice made her believe him. Very well. We returned to our quarters. They left the reception as quietly as possible, moving through the crowded corridors of Nexus Prime toward the diplomatic wing. The walked ahead, his hand on his weapon. Daniel walked behind, watching their back. They reached the princess's quarters without incident. The rooms were luxurious with thick walls and heavy doors designed for security. I must sweep the room, Daniel said. There is no need, Derek said. These quarters are monitored by station security. No one could have entered. Daniel ignored him and searched the rooms anyway. He checked the closets, the bathroom, the ventilation covers, and the spaces behind furniture. He found nothing. Satisfied, Valitha asked coldly, for now. Daniel moved toward the door. I will stand guard outside. Lock the door and do not open it for anyone except me or Commander. Thea had finally lost patience. Enough. You have been paranoid since we left Valoria. You see assassins in every shadow. I am tired of your human fears. She pointed at the door. Go stand outside like a statue. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not embarrass me further. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. As you wish, Your Highness. He stepped outside and the door closed behind him. Thea threw herself onto a couch and rubbed her temples. Humans, she muttered. They see danger everywhere. The nodded in agreement. Paranoid creatures. They've not yet learned that the galaxy is mostly peaceful. Outside, Daniel stood alone. The corridor. He positioned himself carefully with his back against the wall and a clear view of the only approach. His senses were on high alert. He did not have to wait long. 3 hours into the night cycle, he detected movement at the far end of the corridor. 12 figures emerged from the shadows, moving in perfect tactical formation. They wore dark armor and carried weapons designed for silent killing. Daniel took a deep breath and activated his distress beacon. Then he sealed the door behind him, trapping himself outside with the Assassins, the lead assassin stopped a few meters away and studied Daniel with cold amusement. 1 human against 12 of us. Step aside and we will let you live. Daniel settled into a fighting stance. She is my responsibility. The corridor was narrow, barely wide. Enough for 3 people to walk side by side. Daniel had chosen his position carefully. In the open, 12 trained assassins would overwhelm him in seconds, but here in this confined space they could only attack 2 or 3 at a time. Thought it was not a fair fight, but Daniel had never believed in fair fights. The lead assassin tilted his head, studying Daniel with the curiosity of someone examining an insect. He was Corin, tall and heavily muscled with the scars of a veteran soldier. Behind him stood 11 others, a mixed team of Kootenai warriors and mercenaries from various species. You are either very brave or very stupid, the leader said. 1 human cannot stop us. Step aside and you may live to see tomorrow. Daniel did not move. I was told Corny respected courage. Was that information wrong? The leader's eyes narrowed. Courage is admirable. Suicide is not. You will die in this corridor, human. Your body will be cold before anyone finds it, maybe. Daniel shifted his weight slightly, preparing himself, but so will yours. The leader laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Kill him. 2 assassins rushed forward, their blades gleaming in the dim light. They were fast, faster than most humans could track, but Daniel was not. Most humans, 15 years of special forces training had turned his body into a weapon. He had fought in jungle wars, desert conflicts, and zero-gravity combat. He had killed men with his bare hands in darkness so complete he could not see his own fingers. He had survived situations that would have broken most soldiers. Earth was a death world. Its children were forged in blood and fire. Daniel moved. The first assassin swung his blade in a killing arc. Daniel ducked under it, stepped inside the attack, and drove his elbow into the assassin's throat. Cartilage crushed. The assassin dropped. The second assassin stabbed forward. Daniel caught his wrist, twisted, and used the assassin's own momentum to throw him into the wall. The impact cracked bone. Before the assassin could recover, Daniel took his blade and drove it through his chest. 2 down, 10 to go. The next wave came faster. 3 assassins attacked together, trying to overwhelm Daniel with numbers. He backed up, using the narrow corridor to limit their angles. 1 stabbed high, 1 stabbed low, 1 tried to circle around. Daniel parried the high strike with his stolen blade, stepped on the low attacker's hand hard enough to break fingers, and spun to slash the third across the face. Blood sprayed. Wounded assassin screamed and stumbled back. A blade cut across Daniel's arm. Pain flared hot and sharp. He ignored it. Pain was just information. It told him he was still alive. He grabbed the assassin who had cut him and head-butted him with brutal force. The assassin's nose shattered. Daniel followed with a knee to the groin and an elbow to the back of the skull. The assassin collapsed and did not move. Inside the sealed room, heard the sounds of combat. Steel against steel, bodies hitting walls. Screams of pain cut suddenly short. She rushed to the door and looked through the small window. What she saw made her blood freeze. Daniel was fighting like nothing she had ever witnessed. He moved with deadly grace, his body flowing from one attack to the next without pause. Every strike was precise. Every movement was efficient. He wasted nothing. Blood covered his arms. Some of it was his, most of it was not. Spirits of our ancestors, Turk whispered beside her. What is he? An assassin swung a heavy blade at Daniel's head. He ducked, stepped forward, and drove his palm into the assassin's chest. The strike looked gentle, almost soft, but the assassin flew backward as if hit by a vehicle, crashing into his companions. Daniel pressed the advantage. He was among them now, too close for them to use their superior numbers. They could not swing their weapons without risking their own allies, and in close combat Daniel was a nightmare. He broke arms, he crushed windpipes, he shattered knees and snapped spines. His movements were brutal but controlled, each one designed to neutralize a threat as quickly as possible. Another blade cut him this time across the back. Daniel grunted but did not slow. He turned, caught the attacker by the face, and slammed his head into the wall with enough force to leave a dent in the metal. 7 down. 5 remained. The survivors backed away, fear finally showing in their eyes. They had expected to kill one human in seconds. Instead, this demon in human form had torn through more than half their team. What are you? One of them, his thought. Daniel did not answer. He was breathing hard now, blood dripping from a dozen wounds, but his eyes were steady, cold, completely focused. He attacked. The next assassin died with Daniel's blade in his heart. The one after that died with a broken neck. The third tried to run, but Daniel caught him and ended his life with a single precise strike to the base of the skull. 2 left, the leader and one final warrior. The leader drew his own blade, a ceremonial weapon marked with symbols of corny honor. You are injured, human, bleeding, weakening. You cannot defeat both of us. Probably not, Daniel admitted. His voice was steady despite his wounds. But I only need to stop you long enough for security to arrive. My beacon has been active for 3 minutes. Help is coming. The leader smiled. Cry. Then we finish this quickly. Both Koran attacked together. They were the best fighters of the group, their movements coordinated and deadly. Daniel blocked one strike, dodged another, but a third slipped through his defense and opened a cut across his chest. He staggered. For a moment it seemed like he would fall. Inside the room, the pressed her hands against the window. Get up, she whispered. Please get up. Daniel steadied himself against the wall. Blood soaked his gray clothes, turning them black. His vision was starting to blur. But he thought of the princess. He thought of his mission. He thought of every soldier who had died under his command, every life he had failed to save. Not this time. He pushed off the wall and attacked. The warrior on his left never saw the strike coming. Daniel's blade found the gap in his armor and pierced his heart. As the warrior fell, Daniel used his body as a shield against the leader's counterattack. Then it was just the two of them. The leader was skilled. He pressed Daniel hard, using his superior reach and fresh condition to drive the wounded human back. Their blades clashed again and again, sparks flying in the dim corridor. Daniel felt his strength fading. He had lost too much blood. His muscles were burning. His body was screaming for rest. But he had one advantage the Koran did not understand. Humans were not just survivors. They were hunters. They had spent millions of years chasing prey across endless plains, running until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. They could push through pain that would stop other species. They could fight long after their body should have given up. Daniel caught the leader's blade with his own and held it. The Koran pushed down with all his strength, but Daniel did not yield. You should have brought more men, Daniel said. Then he released the blade lock, stepped inside the Courtney's guard, and drove his knife into the assassin's throat. The leader fell. 12 bodies lay scattered across the corridor. The walls were painted with blood. The floor was slippery with it. Daniel stood among the dead, swaying slightly. His knife dropped from numb fingers. His legs felt like water. The door behind him finally opened. Valitha rushed out, followed by the distant sound of station security. Finally arriving, Valitha saw Daniel surrounded by corpses. She saw his wounds, the blood, the exhaustion in his eyes. She saw what this ordinary, quiet human had done to protect her. You sealed the door, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You trapped yourself outside with them. Why? Daniel looked at her. Despite his injuries, despite his exhaustion, his eyes were clear. My mission was your survival, not mine. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed into her arms. The medical bay of Nexus Prime was one of the most advanced in the galaxy. Doctors from a dozen species worked together using technology that could heal wounds that would have been fatal. Just a century ago, they had saved beings who had been shot, burned, and even partially disintegrated, but they had never seen anyone quite like Daniel. Carter, the human, had lost nearly 40% of his blood. He had suffered cuts, stab wounds, broken ribs, and a fractured skull. Any other species would have been dead long before the fighting ended, but Daniel's body refused to give up. His heart kept beating. The chief medical officer told Valitha as she waited outside the treatment room. Even when there was barely enough blood to fill it, his muscles kept working. Even when they had no fuel, it is as if his entire biology is designed to keep functioning past the point of death. Will he survive? Valitha asked. Yes, amazingly. Yes, we have stabilized him and replaced the lost blood. His wounds are already beginning to heal at a rate that should not be possible. The doctor shook his head in wonder. Humans are remarkable creatures. We have been underestimating them. Valitha said nothing. She had been underestimating them too. The investigation into the attack was swift and thorough. Station security identified all 12 assassins as members of a radical faction within the Koran Empire. They called themselves the True Path, and they believed that peace with the Valorans was a betrayal of everything their people stood for. Ambassador Draven was furious when he heard the news. He publicly condemned the attack and demanded that the True Path leaders be arrested immediately. The Korami government agreed, eager to distance themselves from the failed assassination. This changes nothing, Draven announced to the gathered diplomats. The actions of extremists will not derail our pursuit of peace. If anything, this attack proves how important this treaty is. We must show the galaxy that Corny and Valorans can work together. Thea watched Draven carefully during his speech. She was not sure if his anger was genuine or a performance, but it did not matter. The attack had actually strengthened her position. The Corinth were now desperate to prove their good faith, which meant they would be more willing to accept her terms, all because one human had stood against 12 killers. 3 days after the attack, Daniel was well enough to Receive visitors, Thea went to see him. Alone, leaving Verks outside the door. Daniel was sitting up in his bed. His chest wrapped in bandages, his face was pale but his eyes were alert. When he saw the princess enter, he tried to. Stand, please, Belitha said, raising a hand. Do not get up on my account. Daniel settled back against his pillows. Your Highness, I apologize for not being able to continue my duties. Your duties? Thea almost laughed. You killed 12 assassins by yourself. I think you have earned some rest. She sat in the chair beside his bed and studied his face. He looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. If she had passed him on the street, she would not have given him a second glance. I owe you an apology, she said. Finally, I treated you poorly from the moment we met. I judged you by your appearance, by your species, by my own prejudice. I was wrong. Daniel shook his head. You do not owe me anything. Your Highness, you treated me as most people treat humans. I am used to it. That does not make it right. Valitha leaned forward. You knew about the threat. You tried to warn us and we ignored you because we thought we knew better, because we thought a human could not possibly understand danger the way we do. Underestimation can be useful. Daniel said, if your enemies think you are weak, they become careless. They make mistakes. That is how humans have survived for so long. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but we are patient and we are persistent. The Litha considered his words. Is that why you did not argue with me? Why you accepted my insults without complaint? Partly a small smile crossed Daniel's face, and partly because arguing with royalty seemed like a bad idea. Thea laughed despite herself. It was the first time she had laughed since leaving Valoria. I have a question, she said, when you sealed the door, trapping yourself outside with them. Did you think you would survive? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I hoped I would, but hope was not the priority. My mission was to keep you alive. If I died doing that, then I would have completed my assignment. That is, Valitha searched for the right word. That is terrifying. How can you accept death so calmly? Every soldier accepts that possibility when they take the oath, Daniel said. Death is not the worst thing that can happen. Failing the people who depend on you is worse. Valitha thought about her own guards, the Valoran warriors who had protected her family for generations. They were brave and skilled, but she had never heard any of them speak like this. To Daniel, death was not an abstract concept. It was a constant companion, something he walked beside every day. My father was right to trust Earth, she said quietly, and I was wrong to doubt you. I will not make that mistake again. The treaty was signed 3 days later in a ceremony attended by representatives from across the galaxy. Valitha and Ambassador Draven stood together, their signatures marking the end of 100 red years of hostility. It was a historic moment, broadcast to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. When the ceremony was complete, addressed the gathered crowd. This peace was nearly destroyed before it began. She said, extremists tried to murder me to prevent this treaty from being signed. They failed because of the courage of one being, a human named Daniel Carter, who stood alone against 12 assassins in one. The crowd murmured in surprise. Humans were rarely mentioned in such important speeches. Earth is a young member of our galactic community, Valitha continued. Many of us have dismissed them as primitive, aggressive, and unworthy of our attention. I was guilty of this myself. But I have learned that humans possess qualities we have forgotten to value: loyalty, determination, the willingness to sacrifice everything for those they protect. She turned to where Daniel stood at the edge of the crowd, still recovering from his wounds, but insisting on attending the ceremony. Mr. Carter, please step forward. Daniel walked slowly to stand beside the princess. He looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he did not retreat. I am formally requesting that you remain as my permanent escort, Belitha announced, not as a political gesture, but as a recognition of your abilities and your character. Will you accept? Daniel bowed his head. It would be my honor, Your Highness. The crowd applauded. Among them, the Litha noticed several human diplomats watching with quiet pride. That evening, a celebration banquet was held in the Great Hall. Dignitaries from both empires mingled freely, toasting the new era of peace. Palifa moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and making polite conversation. A Courtney diplomat approached her, his eyes curious. Your Highness, I must ask, you have only one bodyguard now, and he is a human. Do you not feel vulnerable? The Litha glanced across the room to where Daniel stood quietly against the wall, his eyes still watching for threats. Even at a peaceful celebration, he looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. She knew better now. No, she said, smiling, I have never felt safer. The diplomat looked confused, but did not press further. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, Belitha found Daniel on a balcony overlooking the stars. The lights of Nexus Prime sparkled below them. Millions of beings going about their lives, unaware of how close they had come to war. You did well today, Velitha said. Join him at the railing. I stood there, Daniel replied. You did the hard work. Signing documents is not hard work. Convincing two civilizations to trust each other is. Daniel turned to look at her. You changed things today, not just for Valoria and Athen, but for humans too. When people hear what happened, they will think differently about my people. Velitha nodded. She had thought about that. One human had changed her entire perspective. Perhaps his story would change others. Earth's reputation in this galaxy has been built slowly, she said, one mission at a time, one sacrifice at a time. Is that not exhausting? Daniel smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. It is how humans have always done things, he said. We earn our place, one step at a time, one life at a time. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The princess who had learned humility, the human who had shown her what courage truly meant. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities. But for tonight there was peace, and that was enough.